Okay, project du jour. Got my Landa high power pressure washer here turned on its side with the 13 horse Honda motor. They use these stupid little studs in the exhaust ports, and you basically put that in there, bottom it out, and then put the manifold for the muffler over that, and then put a flange nut on there. Because this is aluminum and a lot of vibration because of the high pressure wash system, it's stripped these nuts or these holes out, so they are aluminum. And the best option I've come up with is to drill them out, tap them to a bigger size from 5/16. We're going to go to 3/8, and then I'm going to do a couple of other little things to make sure that these things never come out again. Tapping it at 3/8 calls for a 5/16 drill out, so I just did that. Put this little rag in here to keep any debris out, so you can see the holes are now drilled out to 5/16, and the next part is to tap them. Okay, I've got the 3/8 bolt tap ready to go in, and it's going in nicely, and I'm using a little bit of this stuff here to make sure it cuts nice and clean and smooth and goes in properly. So anyway, getting her done. That's what you call getting lucky. The clearance between the tap handle and the belt cover on the machine was down to the nitty-gritty here, and if it went actually this side here is a little bit longer because this is the side that actually holds the tap in place, and when I bottomed out the tap in the hole was right at the point where this thing was hitting, so I just got lucky on that. Okay, got the last hole tapped. There's only 2 of them, but got that bad boy finished. Now I'll just back this out. Gotta clean all that grunge off of there, and then I'll clean out the hole. But looks like it did a nice job. Looks like really nice threads on there, and that should make for a nice receptacle for the new grade 8 bolts. Right, I couldn't hold the camera and show the next step, but I used this Makita cutoff wheel and cut off the end of the bolts so that I am left with just a stud. And then I ground down the edges of this bad boy to get all the burrs off of it, which was the former head of that bolt. Put a couple of nuts on here and tighten them together so that they I'd have something to hold on to. And then put it over here on the grinder a little bit, ground down the end of that bad boy. And then I took the die, and that's, as you can see, that's a 3/8 die, and put that bad boy over the end of it and ran it around there a little bit just to cut the thread real nice on the tip, so that way it would go into the cylinder head nicely without any binding. And I'll do that to the other one and go to the next step. Boring out a hole in the stud for the cotter pin that's going to go in the castle nut. The grade 8 bolt, and I'm using a cobalt tip drill bit, which is meant for hardened steel. So I ground down the edges of the holes that I just put in here, the hole, and now I'm using a die to run over it and take the burrs off the edges of the holes. Okay, the next step is blow a little carburetor cleaner into each of the newly tapped holes and make sure that any residue from the cutting oil is removed. And then after that is done, blow the holes out a little bit and get rid of any of that extra fluid. It evaporates very quickly, so it should go away pretty quickly. And then we're on to thread lock and putting the studs in on there. So now I'm gonna go ahead and get that bolt in there. Solid Loctite, baby. High temperature, high strength. All right. I'll get the other one and we'll come back and we'll start to torque those down. For 17 foot-pounds according to the engine spec. And we're just gonna go ahead and tighten these bad boys up. Till we hear a beep. Okay, so I got the two studs in there and I decided to put them in all the way and then back them off just slightly, because using the double nut, including a castle nut with a cotter pin in it, on the exhaust manifold, which is this piece right here, it will keep the studs from coming out, and I don't want to bottom them out inside of the aluminum head because of heat change to the different metals. I don't want them to cause a problem at the bottom end of where they are in there. So here's the OEM gasket that goes between the head and the manifold, and because I am using 3/8 bolts, I had to cut a notch out on the outside here, which should still give it plenty of gasket sealing on this part here. This is just kind of hold it into place. So I had to cut those out so that I could fit this onto these 3/8 studs, and I'll put that on next. Okay, so I got that in place and went in with a screwdriver and flattened out each of those little tabs on both sides so that they're nice and fit properly. And now the hole is ready to go and the gasket's in place. So the next step is to put on the muffler and manifold, which are already pre-assembled. I pre-assembled them because it's going to be much harder to put those bolts on upside down once this is all mounted up, and as you can see, it does an elbow type of change there. So this bad boy here is going to go on right there, and I certainly cannot do this with one hand, so I'm going to have to... Okay, got that in place, and now I'm going to put on these lock washers, one on each side. And then comes the grade 8 nuts, which are nice heavy duty hardened nuts. And then comes the other one. And I'll tighten those down and then move on to the castle nuts. Okay, got this set for 17 foot-pounds, which is the OEM spec on exhaust bolts. Just go ahead and tighten that down, making sure that my cotter pin stays in the 12 o'clock position, which tells me that the stud is not moving and only the... There we go, we got a vibration and a beep. 17 foot-pounds. And now come the castle nuts. And okay, I've got the grade 8 nuts on there. Got a washer in between the grade 8 nut and the castle nut. Got the castle nut on there with a cotter pin in it. And those should not move at all. And this thing is as solid as a rock. By the way, I did put a new muffler on here as well because the old one looked like crap and I just couldn't stand looking at it anymore. So got a new muffler, new exhaust manifold, new bolts, new everything. So I'm highly confident that it will run like a champ without any issues and will not back itself out. Anyway, that's my project. Now on to the test. Okay, after careful consideration, I thought about it again and decided to put a piece of vineyard wire in instead of 2 cotter pins, because this way the cross piece will keep either bolt from coming undone versus the cotter key, which would just simply keep the nuts from coming loose from the stud. But the cotter pins would have allowed, with vibration, it would have potentially allowed the entire stud to come loose. But this cross piece here locks both of these together, and this piece here on the top is not going to come out because this is very high tensile strength vineyard wire that stretches a quarter of a mile and tightened at both ends. So this is now nice and tight, and I think I'm off to the races.